So my 41st birthday was several weeks ago. It was at the end of March. And I had been told for several days that my family had gotten me the best birthday present, best present that I had ever received. And, I was really busy, but I kept thinking, I wonder what it is. And then it came time to open the present, and Sharon said it again. She said, "You're about to receive the greatest present you've ever gotten." She said, "We nailed it this time. This is what you really want." And I knew, it just hit me all of a sudden, and I knew, and my mouth dropped, my eyes got big, and I looked at her and I said, "Did you get me a statue from Daniel chapter 2? She had got me a statue from Daniel chapter 2. And I know I'm such a Bible nerd, right? And that's okay. I'm a geek. But this story, this prophecy of Daniel 2, I've shared my testimony before, my stories before. This is what got me into the church as a young guy. This is what connected my heart to the Bible. This is what kept me so glued to studies. Was this. And I've always said in ministry, every time, the hundreds of times I've talked about Daniel 2, I've always said at home, man, I wish I had a Daniel 2 statue that I could show people, right? And of course, it's gotten easier over the time as technology has advanced, and, carrying pictures and PowerPoints have gotten easier to do, especially in in-home Bible studies. But I still had this desire for a Daniel 2 statue. And this story is so meaningful to me. But then it didn't end there. It didn't end there, because then I also got to open up a bag that had a t-shirt of the Daniel 2 statue, so that everywhere I go, I can wear it. And also, I didn't bring them all, but also a Daniel 7 shirt with the beasts, and also a sanctuary shirt with the parts of the sanctuary and what they represent. And this is so cool. I love it. I love that people get to see the prophecies as I'm walking around. And I think that was a Thursday night, if I remember right, because the next day I had an appointment in Mammoth, and I wore this shirt. And I didn't see anyone as I walked to the car. I got in the car, I drove. But as soon as I got out of the car, people started looking at me. And it wasn't for the usual reasons of, wow, that guy's huge. That's the usual reason people stare at me. They were looking at me because they were looking at the shirt. And as I got to the doctor's office, and the first person I walk in, if you've been to the doctor's office last year, they take your temperature at the door, they ask you all the questions, and you're going, no, I don't have any of those symptoms. And the whole time that this lady's asking me the questions, her eyes are glued to my shirt. And so she gets to her questions, I say no, and then she goes, "That's so interesting." And, it's only a small little conversation. I said, "Oh, yeah, there's this really cool prophecy in Daniel chapter 2 where it lays out the prophecies of Daniel, or of empires and of world history." She goes, "That's cool stuff." And, I kicked myself because at that moment I didn't have one of Heidi and Jerry's awesome packets, and I wish I had. Because I was thinking of myself, thinking about going in and having my own doctor appointment. This was me time. And then, it continued through the day as I went and got a drink at Looney Bean up there in Mammoth. People kept looking at the shirt, and I've worn it a couple times now. And every time I have worn the shirt, someone has said, "That's so interesting. That's so cool. I've never heard of something like that." I want people to be able to see more in me of Jesus. I hope that's your desire today, that people will see more and more of Jesus in you. Not just in our clothing, but that too. I think, how often do we have brands, sports teams? We've got logos on our shirt. Why don't we have more things like that? It was such a cool idea. Whoever put it together, I'm so thankful that Sharon found it online and found these shirts and that statue. But I want to carry more and more of Jesus with me wherever. In my clothing, but more importantly, in my character. Last Sunday was a really busy day. We left for Leone Meadows we were supposed to meet here at 11. We wanted to leave by 11:15. But my day started a little earlier. I was preaching over at the Presbyterian Church. the church that's on Main Street across from McDonald's. First time I got to preach there at the Presbyterian Church. I've shared with you, many times I've got to preach in the other churches on Sundays over the years, the cool things. But every time it's my first time in a church, guess what story of the Bible I go to for a first time? Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I do now with these churches and go through the prophecy of Daniel 2 and the prophecies of Daniel 7. Then I go to Revelation 13, and I don't have enough time to get into all of that. And it's probably not the opening discussion to talk about the mark of the beast anyway, but I leave them with that taste in their mouth, their desire. And I go, hey, if you want to know what 666 means, you want to know what the mark of the beast is. And this time on Sunday, I said, it's not a microchip in a vaccine, right? It's not this microchip idea that people think about the mark of the beast. I said, it all starts with Daniel chapter 2. So when I finished, I had told them from the beginning, I said, I usually hang around with the churches, answer questions, talk more, study more. I said, but we're leaving right away for Leone Meadows. So my sincerest apologies. I'll be leaving right away. And I looked at my phone. As soon as I said amen, I looked at my phone. It was 11:08. So I had 7 minutes to get over here. So I ran to the back of their church and started collecting my computer and putting it all away. And as I was walking out the door, I heard the lady who followed me up there, the chorister. She said, I don't know about the rest of you, but I know what I'm doing for today. I'm going home, grabbing lunch, and I'm going to read the book of Daniel today. She goes, that was so engaging. She said, I've never studied the book of Daniel. I'm going to go home and study the book of Daniel. I want people to have that experience all the time. That wherever we are as Adventists, the doctor's office, a family gathering, a reunion, shopping at Vaughn's, wherever we are, they become engaged and curious to know Jesus more. That they see Jesus in all that we do. You know how the story of Daniel 2 begins, and you know the vision of Daniel 2. We're not going to go there today with the vision, but I want to remind you as we get to the story of Joseph, because there's a big connection between Daniel 2 and where we are with the story of Joseph. I want to remind you of where the story or the vision dream actually begins. Nebuchadnezzar, the pagan king of Babylon, is actually the first to have the dream of the statue, right? It's not Daniel. It's Nebuchadnezzar who has the dream first. And he has the dream repeatedly, over and over, day after day, night after night, I should say. But what, everyone? In the morning, what? He has no idea. He can't remember the dream. He knows he's been having the dream. It's on his mind. It's right down the tip of his tongue, but it's like God is stopping his brain from actually remembering it. And so, as you know, he calls his wise men together, the wise men of Babylon. He calls them together and he says, hey guys, tell me the dream and its interpretation. What do they say? No problem, chief. Tell us the dream and we'll give you the interpretation. And he says, you guys are the wise men. I can't remember the dream. He actually says, you're connected to the gods. You're supposed to know the gods. So you tell me the dream and the interpretation. And how do they reply? Sure, we'll tell you the interpretation. Tell us the dream. They're stuck. They're Babylon. They're confused. They don't have the answers. They have no idea what to do. Nebuchadnezzar gets incredibly angry. He gets really mad. He realizes his religion is a fallacy. It's false. It's wrong. It's error. He realizes that all these guys that are his yes men are just that. They don't have truth. They're just yes men. And so he declares a death decree that all of the wise men in Babylon are going to die. And not just them, he says, I'm even going to turn your homes, meaning your families, into ashes. Yikes. What was the real purpose for Satan and inspiring such a wicked reply from Nebuchadnezzar. What was Satan really trying to get at? Was Satan trying to kill the wise men of Babylon? Was that his goal? No. Turn with me to Daniel chapter 2. We'll head to Genesis in a second here. But Daniel chapter 2 is where I want to begin. I want us to read verse 13. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 13. So all of the wise men were going to be killed, including the wise men not called to the king's chambers. Do you know that? So he only called apparently some of them, because who wasn't there? Daniel and his friends were not summoned. They're wise men in Babylon. We learned that in Daniel 1. They've become trusted people of the king, but they're not in the chambers. They have to ask about it and find out. So notice what happens in verse 13. So the decree, that's the death decree, went out, and they began killing the wise men. And they, that's the soldiers, they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Now you know where the story goes from there. Daniel says, hold on, let me speak to God. Let's see if I can have the dream. And then him and the three friends, all four of them have the dream. Daniel reports back to the king, tells him the dream and its interpretation, and the rest is Adventist history, right? But what did Daniel do to deserve to die? Right? They came looking for Daniel. This was the ultimate purpose for Satan, and inspiring the king to want to kill all the wise men. It wasn't about the other wise men. Satan desired Daniel and his friends to die. But I ask you again, what did Daniel and his friends do so far in Daniel 2 to deserve death? Nothing. They weren't summoned. They weren't a part of this meeting. They weren't defunct in their knowledge or wisdom. If they had been called, Daniel would have said, okay, king, give me a day. Let me and my friends pray about it. We'll see what the God of heaven wants us to do. They were not a part of this meeting, but they were still summoned to die. Wickedness and wickedness couldn't figure out righteousness. And what did it do? It dragged the righteous into the tribulation. Wickedness and wickedness, right? The pagan king and his pagan wise men couldn't find righteousness. They couldn't find truth. They couldn't help the king together. But it really wasn't about them. Satan was trying to drag the righteous into a tribulation. We see this theme throughout Scripture, don't we? The story was not supposed to be David and Goliath. The story was supposed to be Saul and Goliath. Saul was the king. Saul was the leader. He's the great fighter. We're supposed to remember Saul's victory over Goliath today, but we don't. It was wickedness, the Philistine leader, and wickedness, the Israelite king. And they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't find deliverance. Saul could not answer the question. And what dragged David into it? Wickedness and wickedness dragged David into this tribulation with Goliath. The Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they dragged Jesus constantly into controversy. The Jewish leaders and the Roman leaders. They couldn't answer the questions. They couldn't figure out what was going on. But their alliance together dragged Jesus to the cross. A war between wicked empires. This wicked alliance and this wicked alliance. They went to war, which dragged Abraham into the tribulation of needing to go and solve the problem and to bring Lot out. Over and over and over we see this. Satan uses wickedness and wickedness, but his ultimate purpose in having this fight or this alliance, whatever it is, this inability to solve the world's problems, but Satan has a deeper desire to drag the righteous into tribulation. Did we see that in 2020? All the sides, right? The two sides, this side, always at battle. We're always fighting over anything and everything they could fight over. Dragging the righteous into deeper and deeper into these last days. And this theme isn't just found in Daniel 2. It's not just found throughout the Bible, but it's very strongly in the story of Joseph as well. Joseph, we find Joseph in Genesis 39 on his way to Egypt. Why? Because his brothers, who were wicked, sold him to the Ishmaelites, who were wicked. Then the Ishmaelites, who were wicked, sold him to Potiphar, who was wicked. And then you have Potiphar and Potiphar's wife having an issue over Joseph. And then you have Potiphar and the jail system, the king's jail. What did Joseph do along the way? Did he deserve to be in the pit of despair? No. Did he deserve to be sold to the Ishmaelites? No. Did he deserve to be sold to Potiphar? No. Had he mistreated Potiphar's wife? No. Did he deserve the jail? No. But you see this constantly in Genesis 39. You have wickedness and wickedness working together, and Joseph dragged into one tribulation after another after another. Okay. For those who don't know the story, I actually want to read through parts of the story. Turn with me to Genesis 39. There may be someone here today or someone watching on YouTube who doesn't know the story of Genesis 39. We left off, the last time we saw Joseph, we left off with him being sold to the Ishmaelites who take him to Egypt and sell him to Potiphar. Let's pick up the story in verse 4. We'll read 4 through 6 of Genesis 39. Genesis 39, verses 4 through 6. Says this, so Joseph found favor in his sight, that's Potiphar's sight, and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was that from the time that he had made him overseer of the house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Keep the chapter open. We learn that Joseph was in Potiphar's house for 10 years. 10 years he served Potiphar. What had he done to deserve to be a slave in Potiphar's house? Nothing. Did Joseph have every reason to whine and complain? Yes. Did Joseph have every reason to sit down and refuse to do any work? Yes. He had every right to pout, every reason to revolt, every reason to say, absolutely not, I boycott this, I protest this, right? He had every reason to scream out and say, this is unfair, I don't deserve this. But did Joseph do that? No. Joseph went to work. And he went to work hard for Potiphar. He worked efficiently. He was productive. So much so that at some point in those 10 years, he was promoted to the overseer of Potiphar's house. This non-Egyptian worked harder than the Egyptians in the house. So much so that Potiphar ends up not even paying attention anymore. He knows, Potiphar knows that his house is in better hands, in Joseph's hands, than his own hands. Potiphar doesn't even know what's going on except what? There's a plate of food in front of me 3 meals a day. That's all he knows. He's out, I don't know, he's out on the Nile River. He's out fishing. He's basically retired. And yet his house continues to prosper and prosper and prosper. And every time he comes home, there's food in front of him. This is how hard Joseph has worked. Early retirement in many ways for Potiphar. Wow. I don't know if I would have reacted that way. I don't know. Maybe you can say the same thing. I hope now that I will react that way if this ever befalls me. And I wonder, I look back at 2020 and all the things we were asked to do. You've still got masks on, right? All these things we're still asked to do. Are we working hard, not for my personal freedoms, but for the freedom I find in Jesus and the freedom I can share with others that they can find in Jesus? I want to be more like Joseph in this story. I want to dare to be a Joseph. So the story continues. There's a reason why verse 6 ends with Joseph's good looks. He's a good-looking young man. In his 20s now, right? 10 years. He was a teenager, 10 years. He's now in his 20s. And if there's anything on the hearts and minds of a 20-year-old guy, it is women. Right? Women. And this had to be on his mind. This had to be on his mind. To be with a woman. To marry a woman. And now he has an opportunity. Because Potiphar's wife has discovered Joseph. And she's looking at him going, wow, forget Potiphar. He's gone anyway. He's always out on the Nile River. He's always hanging out. It's Joseph who's around. Joseph's the breadwinner around here. Joseph's the good-looking guy. He's young. Joseph's the guy is why I have food on my plate every night. Joseph's taking care of me. And she lusts after Joseph. Read verse 9. This is what Joseph responds with when she throws herself at him. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he, that's Potiphar, kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph knew where the line was. Potiphar had said, you have everything. This house, mi casa, su casa. Everything's yours, but me wife is me wife. Right? It's not su wife, it's me wife. That's the line. That's the line, Joseph. Everything else is yours, but my wife is mine. And Joseph knows this. But I want you to remember, is Potiphar paying any attention? Is Potiphar paying any attention? Potiphar's not paying any attention. Potiphar's not around. What does he know? He knows there's food on his plate. That's it. Boy, how easy it would have been for Joseph, a man in his 20s, desiring to be with a woman, to walk this path of temptation and go, well, you know, Potiphar isn't paying any attention. How's he going to know? How easy it would have been to walk that line. But more important to him wasn't what Potiphar knew. He didn't care so much. He doesn't say here, are you sure? Because your husband's going to find out. Is he worried about Potiphar finding out? Is that what he says? He doesn't say, What if word gets out? What if you can't keep your hands off me? What if a servant sees? What if we fall in love? What if he's not worried about what humanity sees? What does he say? How can I sin against who? My God. Because though Potiphar will likely not see, though Potiphar won't pay attention, though Potiphar's not going to catch them likely in his bed, he's more concerned about what God will see and what God will write down in the record books. How often we need to remember that, you and I, every single one of us, no matter what. Maybe we're gossiping to a confidant. We know that person's not going to spread it around. But God writes it down. Maybe we're all alone and we're clicking on our phone or on our computer and we're like, well, no one's going to see what I'm watching now. No one's going to see what I'm looking at now. But God writes it in our books. Our concern isn't whether my wife, my husband, my kids, my parents, my whoever we might be worried about. It's not about whether they catch us. It's about God writing it down as a sin in our record books. So, he says no. Many of you, of course, know the story. She ends up trying over and over and over again. One day he gets a little too close physically, not close to sitting, but too close physically that she's able to grab his garment. As he flees from her, she rips his clothing, and then she presents it to Potiphar as a lie. Your Hebrew servant. There's a reason she points out he's Hebrew. She's trying to say, you brought this heathen into our house. You brought this pagan into our house. You brought this other person outside of our Egyptian culture and society into our house. And this kid, this heathen, this Hebrew servant has attacked me. And I screamed and I got away. And he left his garment behind. Now Potiphar sends Joseph to prison. Notice verse 20. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. Joseph has done nothing wrong, repeatedly, over and over and over, and yet he continues to stumble, we might say. Every 10 steps forward, he takes 10 steps back, 12 steps back, 15 steps back, because they're dragging him back. By the way, did Potiphar believe his wife? If Potiphar had believed his wife, what would he have done to Joseph? Killed him. But Potiphar takes the easy way out. He doesn't believe his wife. And rather than reprimand her, he saves face. He saves his own reputation, his own ego, his own pride. At his own expense, which is really the ultimate confusion of sin. Because Joseph has been so good in his house that he doesn't care about what's going on because he trusts this man to lead everything. But his pride is so strong, at his own sacrifice, at his own expense, he takes this prize and throws him to prison rather than hold his wife accountable for what he knows is true, that she was lying. The brothers and the Ishmaelites and Potiphar and his wife, Potiphar and the jailers. What choice did Joseph have in any of this? He had no choice in the decisions that these groups made. The wicked and the wicked worked together to bring the demise of the righteous, to drag the righteous into trial and tribulation. He had no choice but to be in the midst of this trial. But here was the choice he had. How was he going to act in the midst of trial and tribulation? And Joseph chose to honor God. In fact, notice, keep reading, Genesis 39:22. Now he's in prison. And notice he doesn't change. Verse 22, and the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison, whatever they did there, it was his doing. He's in Potiphar's house. He works his way up to become the commander of Potiphar's house by honoring God. He gets sent to prison unfairly. He doesn't give up. He doesn't quit. He doesn't whine. He doesn't complain. He doesn't, throw a tantrum. He just honors God in the midst of the prison and works his way up in there. That was the only choice he had. He didn't walk himself into trial and tribulation, but while the wicked dragged him into trial, he said, I will honor God no matter what, no matter where, no matter when, no matter who, no matter their circumstance, I'm going to honor God. The wicked and the wicked alliances may work against us. We know why. We know who is the inspiration, the father of the wicked sides. But we have to honor God regardless of circumstance. You know why Joseph honored God? Because Joseph cared more about what God wrote of him than what man said about him. Joseph cared more about what God wrote of him than what man said about him. In each of those stories, someone is passing on a lie about Joseph. We don't know what his brothers said to the Ishmaelites, but they passed on the lie that he was a slave. Get rid of him, take him. Potiphar's wife lies about him. Potiphar lies about him, throws him into prison unfairly. But Joseph cared more about what God wrote of him in the books than what man said about him. Turn with me to Psalms 40. We've been reading along in Psalms 40 and connecting it to the story of Joseph. And this very idea is the very next set of verses. We've read 1 through 6 already. And notice how verse 7 and 8 continue in Psalms chapter 40. Psalms chapter 40. We've been connecting that to the story of Joseph. Here is verse 7 and verse 8. Psalms 40, verse 7 and 8. This is the very idea here about what God writes of us. It says here, then I said, behold, I come. In the scroll of the book, it is written of me. Verse 8. So here's what's written of him. I delight to do your will, O my God, and your law is within my heart. Joseph cared more about what God wrote of him than what man said about him. We care so much what people think about us. We care so much about how people judge us, what people say about us. I know I do. We care so much about whether someone's mad at us or if someone's bothered with us or if someone's lying about us. We get so upset when someone falsely accuses us, don't we? I know I'm not the only one in the room. I get so annoyed when someone says something that I don't think is true about me. Joseph, and here in Psalms 40, David, remind us we are to care more about what God is writing about us. Does God write accusations down? False lies down? Little white lies down? Does God write down rumors he's heard? Does God write down gossip about us? No, he's writing the truth about us, right? In his heavenly records, he's writing the truth about us. We need to care about what God writes about us and care less about what other people say about us. Because in the end, when we care about what God is writing about us, and if we're writing this if our record says, verse 8, I delight to do your will, oh my God, if my life is reflecting that in the world around me, People will speak less about us because they see more of Jesus in us. They'll want to know more about us. It's not just in our clothing, though that's cool, but in our character. We want people to say, hey, I want what he has. I want that peace that they have. I want that assurance that they have, that faith that they have. This is something that we don't think enough about. We look around as if no one will know. We try to hide our thoughts, our actions, our words. But every action, every thought, every word is written down with such precision. And I'm quoting Patriarchs and Prophets, by the way. Every act, every thought, every word is written down with such precision that if we were to read our record book, we would think that all of heaven is only paying attention to us. If I was to read my record book, I would say, boy, this record book is so spot on, so perfectly written of my life. All of heaven must be paying attention only to me. But in the end, Jesus is paying attention to everyone perfectly. He knows everyone, every thought, every intention, every action, every word. Your wife, your husband, your parents, your children, your neighbor, they may know what you're doing publicly, but they may not know what you're doing privately. But God sees everything and writes it down. Now you may think that's so unfair. I don't want God writing down everything that I do. But by the way, what is this? Is this the written transcript of everything God is doing and has done? Is this right here? This is the written transcript of his character, is it not? Before he wrote down about us, he's writing down, he inspired the prophets and the writers to write down of his actions and his thoughts. And what are his thoughts towards you? Thoughts of peace and not of evil. Amen? Plans to give you a future and a hope. So God is not just putting us in the record books. He has a record book of himself as well. He's in this with us. And so I want to encourage you, dare to be a Joseph. Request God's help in keeping your heavenly record clean of sin. And you know, and I know, what to do with those sins that are already written down, don't we? Repent and confess. Excuse me. Noah found grace in what? In the eyes of the Lord. Daniel 7 says, judgment is found how? In favor of the saints. Is God writing things down because he wants to write our sins down? No, because he wants to give grace to the sinner. Because he wants to have judgment found in your favor. That is why he's writing these things down. And quickly here we'll notice that in the last days, it's the same formula. The first beast of Revelation 13, the second beast of Revelation 13. Wickedness and wickedness. What will they do? Will they work together? They'll work together. Will they claim to have the answers? The solutions for all the problems going on in the world? They'll promise they have all that they can fix it, right? What is Satan's intention, though? To drag the righteous into trial and tribulation. But just as Revelation 14 reminds us, the righteous, it has already been recorded how the righteous will act in that day. They will follow the Lamb where? Wherever he goes. Just like Joseph, the righteous, even though we will be unfairly dragged into trial and tribulation, even though we will be dragged unfairly into the courtrooms before city councils, before judges, before we will be dragged into the mountains to hide from persecution, we'll be dragged into torture and into the dens and the caverns of hell's fire through tribulation. It will all be unfair. But we will follow the Lamb wherever he goes. I want to end back here in Genesis 39 for a second. because there's one more major point we have to notice. I would, of course, notice this because I love sandwiches. Genesis 39. You love sandwiches? I love sandwiches. I'm going to show you that Genesis 39 is a sandwich. It starts and ends the same way, just like a sandwich. Bread and bread, right? Top layer bread, bottom layer bread. We're not talking about those open-faced sandwiches. This is a bread and bread sandwich. We're not talking about gluten-free bread either. This is real sourdough right here. No, anyway, Genesis 39. There's a sandwich here. I want you to notice how the story begins and how it ends. Genesis 39, verse 2 is how the story of Joseph in Potiphar's house begins. Genesis 39, verse 2. 5 important words right here. I hear just another page or two. That's okay, no rush. Genesis 39, verse 2 says here, the Lord was where? With Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Where was the Lord in this trial and tribulation? I want to hear you louder than that, please. Where was the Lord in this trial? With Joseph. And Joseph was a successful man. Do you want to be successful in times of trial and tribulation? The Lord was with Joseph, and he was successful. In other words, he found victory in trial and in tribulation. Why? Because the Lord was with Joseph. That's how the story of Genesis 39 begins. It ends with him in prison. Now he's fallen even deeper into trial and tribulation. More unfairness has taken place. But notice verse 21. In prison it says this, verse 21. But the Lord was where? With Joseph, and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. The world will team up. The world does team up. The world has teamed up against the church. Against you, against your family, against your happiness, against your health. The world is working against you. But the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord is with you. Amen? The world will drag you into trial and fires and tribulation, but God is with us. And He's not just with us, but He makes you victorious through the trial. He makes you successful in the trial. It says in both of these places, whether it was Potiphar's house or in the prison, that they saw what Joseph was doing. They judged Joseph. God judged Joseph. And both God's record and man's record was the same. This man is righteous. This man is successful. This kid knows what he's doing. The Lord is with him. They knew that the Lord was with him. So as the world judges you, and the world judges me, the world judges us, will they come to the same conclusion? Wow, the Lord is with them. Let us go out this week. And all those trials we just presented in prayer request time. The things we thought about, the things we're dealing with. Make sure that in this coming week, whatever you face, that your life, your thoughts, your words, your actions testify that God is with you.